this is going to be the first election where like AI will be on the ballot, which is fascinating to think about. And like, I think what they said is like, that's not going to be like a make or break election issue. I disagree. I think it's going to be like a key issue. I think it's going to divide down party line. I think it's going to go down that sort of line of like, who is bought and paid for and who is of the people. I think it's going to, stream Eddington. Like it really is going to be that in a really fascinating way. And like, I feel like to that, like, I think a lot of the sort of AI, whatever the phrase is, like the rooster's going to come home to roost or whatever. Like, it seems like this is the year where a lot of these things, was that the right way to say it? Doesn't matter.
No,
I'm
the quote is that the chickens are going to come home to roost, and this
Yeah,
is
sure. The roosters come home and they
historically
become chickens.
quote
Exactly.
for a variety
Well,
of
sure.
reasons. Hip replacement episode 40. Another milestone, Kyle, on our way to infinity.
In our way to infinity, yes. I mean, 40 is a big number. 40 is a big year for a lot of people. I was telling somebody actually really quickly, they were like, oh, how long have you been doing the podcast? And I was like, it's not been a year, but we've done nearly 40 episodes, and there are 52 weeks in a year. So we did a pretty good job in 2026.
See,
I will say.
there we go, and we've maintained our consistency. Well, we're here today with Antonio Gary Jr., who I've just become acquainted with. But Kyle, tell us how did we get here?
Yes, Antonio is a strategist and a creator. I'm sure you don't know, Ben. You're not as much of a sort of like TikTok person. You're on Instagram. Antonio's videos for months, if not years, have passed my profile or passed my feed, my For You. Many people have sent me his videos and just been like, this is so good and this is like a smart take. And they are. And so from just sort of like in the halls of the internet, a few months ago was like, we should have Antonio on. And I reached out and we're very fortunate that you're here, because I was like, this seemed like a big shot, and here we are. So welcome, Antonio.
Yeah, no, great to be here. And I mean, it's funny. We were just talking about it. Internet algorithm doing its job. It gets a lot of hate, but have both like separately been following your work and also reference it weekly. So it also helps with just staying up on things and staying tapped in. There's only but so much one person can sift through themselves, and
That's
it
right.
also are different POVs. And I'm like, oh, that's a good take. So it's just the algorithm said, hey, you guys need to connect, and it finally happened. So it gets a lot of slack, but
the internet can still be good.
The universe, that's right.
The universe.
Well, I was going to say Antonio's over is across Brooklyn from me currently, but the universe bringing us together does actually bear one important announcement, which is that Kyle is coming to New York next week, and that we are going to record the next 2 episodes of Hip Replacement live. So, Antonio, we would love to come and hang with us IRL. And of course, if you're listening to this and you're interested in coming to check out a live recording of Hip Replacement, give us a bell, DM Kyle or me, and we will send you the details, which we'll announce better. But we're going to be working with our friends over at Air, the creative facilitation software platform, and longtime supporters of both the Trend Report and of Sick, my newsletter. So anyway, excited about that. But anyway, Antonio, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. This conversation normally kind of runs the gamut between generations, the foibles and complaints of generations X, Y, and Z. But this one, it being our first episode of the year, and also there being not as much sort of like generational stuff, I wouldn't say, in the news this week. We're looking, I think, more at like big picture predictions for the year, or just kind of where we're at in culture, which you could probably sum up with one word right now, which I would say is friction. Like obviously developments in the news have provided us plenty of friction, most of it bad. But there's also been some discussion around, as the Cut or New York Magazine, whichever idiom started it, in friction maxing, in the idea that we've got to get away from that algorithm that you just named a second ago, and instead like introduce a little bit of difficulty into our lives. Antonio, I'm curious, like, what was it about that article that jumped out at you?
Mainly the idea, it's well, first, just going back of being a millennial, right? So you grew up in the era of now, even though we're saying there's not like a generational thing, but the kind of millennial nostalgia of like millennials knew how to live best, and they're
My
which is funny. I mean,
which
we were
I
just
I agree.
differ with
I agree.
completely, but yeah,
we
yeah,
were
you
just
guys
figuring
agree,
it
I
out,
differ.
but the shift was really just that everything you had to work a little bit for things, there and I'm jumping around, but with the friction maxing, that article specifically, it kind of tied back to that this other article I read with just how millennials and Gen Z signal status. So a lot of that friction was a part of the process to show that you actually walk to the walk and talk to talk. Being able to find obscure sources of music, being caught up on restaurants that you had to stumble into or walk into, and you did have things like Yelp, but you still had to sift through reviews. So the idea of friction, I feel, has been, as a millennial, something that we've been born with, and just had to sift through. But any other generation, I remember when I first got I'm dating myself here, but it was like a GPS. This was before you had like GPS on your phone. You were
Right, it
like
had like the
popping it into
Garmin,
the window of
the
your
Tom
phone,
Tom.
and but
Yeah.
before that, you were printing out. Someone's calling me an unk right now, and I'll take that with the gold star.
Well, you literally asked for this.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's just, every generation had different iterations of friction, and then we just reached a point now where friction was viewed as a bad thing. But the way I like to think about it is friction is intent, friction is being passive. So for me, the idea, I don't agree that you have to seek friction in every aspect of your life. Like things can be easier, but it's just knowing when and where and how you're going to set those boundaries, which is the harder aspect, in my
Yeah.
view of it.
Well, I mean, look, it's friction in a lot of respects, Kyle, is proof of life, right? It's like
Proof of
we
humanity.
we right. If there isn't a little bit of effort demonstrated, then is it real?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about it is that like it really completely agree, and that has been something that's been on my mind for some time. Is that like to me, it's also like friction is the idea of making things less easy, and oftentimes like when you are squeezing the fruit to get the juice, like it does taste sweeter. And I think a big example of that is something I think about a lot is like our relationship, like the arts and quote unquote things we consume, be it clothes, be it a movie, be it music. And like, again, going with the dated thing is like, I do remember like as a kid or even in like young adulthood, like saving money or being really intentional about like, I need to have this $30 so I can buy X imported record because I can't get it anywhere. And I need to go to Amoeba after work on Friday and get it.
Right.
And so, like, and then once I got it, I listened to it really thoughtfully. I made the time, I did whatever. Versus now, like, I get that record 7 times a week, if not twice a day. I half listen to it once and then forget that I have it. And like, that's like, it's a terrible experience for a listener, but it's even worse experience for the artist who then feels like they have to do that because like they're not getting the intentional listener, consumer, whatever. And like it all goes together. Like I do think that that is true. But like there are perks to it, but also like I do think it makes you know yourself better, know what you like more, know your artist, you know your community more. And I think that's like to me what it gets at too.
So here's my question then, Antonio, as a strategist, right? If we have established that friction is proof of life, or that it adds some sort of value to an experience or a product or whatever, and yet it is difficult and or more difficult than not friction, right? How do you convince somebody that they have to introduce a little friction into their ecosystem in order for it for it to then become valuable? Like, where are the proof points?
Where does it get introduced, or how do you convince someone that some amount of
I
friction
mean,
is necessary?
it's like saying to somebody, hey, the right way for you to do something is the hard way. You could do it the easy way. It would be faster. It might be cheaper. It certainly would allow you to go home at 5 o'clock as opposed to having to stick around after hours. Like, but you should do it the hard way because strategically it's the right thing. Like I know I struggle sometimes to try to get people to convince people that way, and I wonder how you do it.
Well, I wouldn't say I do it all the time because it depends on
Of
what,
course.
where the friction, right? Because that's the other thing. I don't think that friction just for friction's sake is great. It's
Sure.
about the intent. It's about like what is the desired outcome, and then who and why are you trying to introduce friction? So I wouldn't say that because someone could say, hey, you need to get instead of chat GPTing a recipe, you need to or like Googling it and them summarizing the AI results, you need a cookbook. Never owned a cookbook in my life. Like
Yeah.
give me the recipe,
Oh,
and but to be fair, I'm like a very like meal prep, food sorted, boom. Like that to me to keep me on task isn't I'm not the right person for that friction.
Sure.
And for me, DoorDash is gonna be seeing more money from me that they shouldn't. Uh,
fair, fair.
The bane of
You
our
know that about
existence
you.
at the
That's what
moment.
matters.
Yeah.
so it just depends, and I do stand by that friction is good. It just is a great thing to introduce. It just depends on every strategist's favorite thing is why. Like right, like why are we
Yeah.
introducing this? Is it just because we want to make it harder? Life is already hard. What behaviors are we trying to create or establish? Um, so yeah, that like sums it up, but I don't know. The issue with the friction maxing to me is that you just start making things unnecessarily hard just to prove that you did
Sure.
something hard and it doesn't actually benefit anything.
Well, I was gonna say is that like I feel like there's probably like there's definitely strategists in rooms right now who are like, well, we're gonna do an event and like you gotta like it's like a scavenger hunt to figure out how to get. It's like that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's not it. But
Yeah.
like
Wait,
it
but why not?
because that's like I mean it depends. But like I feel like number one we've been there done that. That's so like 2014 like whatever. That's very millennial in a way, very escape
Sure. I
room.
mean,
I
yeah.
think to me, and this is an obvious thing, but like I think the friction thing is, and we've talked this literally on this podcast before, is like the brand's trying to be like, you want to create community, you want to whatever, is like make the friction in the room. Like don't have anybody talk, don't have a performer, don't have anything. Make the people talk to each other. You maybe as the brand are introducing people. You're being
Mm.
the party host, like things like that. I think that's a good friction versus like we're going to give you all these steps that sort of silo you and your friends to the arrival versus making that friction in the room. That's what I would think at
Yeah,
least.
but isn't it about ultimately? And look, I take your point. It's horses for courses, right? The strategy and the tactics have to match the audience in the moment. But it isn't so much of this about the way people are discovering that thing. And right, like the huge article in the New York Times that John Caramonica did about Clint Cortez over the weekend demonstrates this. It's like this, all of their drops IRL are all done as like secret coordinates. It's a pop-up thing. It's this experience. You have to run to it. Look, I won the first ever Nike digital scavenger hunt in 2004. True story.
Hey, flex.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I did because nobody else knew how to operate the thing properly. Like the infrastructure wasn't there for it. But nonetheless, so when you come with your scavenger hunt in 2014, I'm like, bro, I won that a decade ago, right?
Well, that's also
Now,
why I'm like, no.
in your mind, you're like, okay, Unc, whatever, shut up, which is a fair and reasonable response, right? It's the same as the kids going to the subway station for Cortez now have about your 2014 thing. I mean, to me, it's like it's horses for courses.
The unsexy part about it and the just vagueness is just it depends, right? Like
Yeah,
he's
for sure.
built a very strong audience direct, and they're just used to having him in front of like they're used to having a direct line to him. So him sharing it is way different than it coming from this brand that we know is putting us through a scavenger hunt trying to make us buy something. For him, it's like we're earning it. For the brand, it's like you're just making a new experience for us to buy something that we may or may not want.
Right, sure.
Very good point.
That is a good point. What the other maxing Antonio, that you put forward this week that I thought was interesting was looks maxing based off this tweet that was sort of like in a digital world where everything is where smart is AI optimized, the smart will pivot to hot or cool. This very sort of superficial looksist or looks well, I guess, I mean, never mind the ist part of it, but just looks oriented sort of thing. It's funny because I reading that Twitter thread, the author asserts the point and then agrees with people disagreeing with it as well as agrees with people agreeing with it. It's this very like Schrodinger's like argument type situation. But I don't know. I mean, you saw the tweet. Did you go, yeah, that makes sense, or did you go, no, that's terrible?
I mean,
or both.
A little bit of both. So what's interesting about that tweet is it broke through the like Twitter, the not Twitter, but the tech X bubble, right? So I stand by. There's this quote. It's like the cool kids want to be rich and the rich kids want to be cool, right?
Of
So
course, yeah.
this feels like another,
Sure.
yeah, it's just like another iteration of that. But never in my life have I seen being unattractive not be something that benefits you in life. Whether you're
being attractive.
being attractive has
Yeah.
always been a benefit. I don't see
Sure.
that changing. The change now to me was less about smart versus hot and more about when information is commoditized, like what makes you different now. And now that it is commoditized, like you have to do your best you have to look a certain way. You have to be appealing in other regards because being smart no longer holds the same status. But what's interesting about it too is everyone's getting the same surgeries. Everyone's kind of, that thread and that post was tied to just what I'm seeing as far as the peptide trend and kind of this normalization of, even though peptides aren't steroids, normalization of injecting yourself with suspicious things to achieve a certain look. So,
Kyle, I meant to tell you, I'm doing next episode in a red light mask. I hope you don't mind. I'm just
Very on trend. The amount of red light masks I've seen in LA and have encountered friends wearing while here,
yeah.
it's on my trend report for sure.
So I have to say, my wife through a very weird happenstance connection started to see this holistic doctor about a year ago, and he's been very good for her in lots of different ways. Like he's helped her with nutrition stuff, he's helped her with some sort of psychology and holistic health stuff, but he gave her a red light mask for Christmas, which was a very generous gift. It's not an inexpensive item. And of course I've been using it, and the thing that I think is funny is that there's a kind of forced meditation period that you have to engage in to do the 20 minutes in the mask, because it's not easy to work or to do whatever. So it's interesting to think the way maybe your Chinese peptide, right, on the one hand is a steroid that does something for you, but maybe it also brings you closer to awareness of your body or your pain thresholds or whatever it is. I mean, the way these things have multiple work on multiple levels, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see play out.
I haven't used I know the mask you're talking about because oddly enough, a friend just posted on it, but I also know that friend is chronically online, so that made sense. But I'm like, can you actually not see out of it? Because it does have
you can.
It's just hard.
But go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah. Well, I was like, you can, but it's like it's quite. It's not debilitating. But like you can't do much. Like you just sort of have to like sit there and take it, and like you could see the TV if you want, but like there's a red light, and like you could like drink a juice, but like your mouth is not, like the hole is not very big. So it's like it is, and being in the room with people who've done it, like again, like holiday gifts, people got red lights. It's just like something you do to just like you sit there and like maybe you walk around, maybe you clean, but it's like it's not something that you like. It's not good for multitasking. Probably,
Yeah,
I don't think it was designed for that reason that you're saying, Ben, but I do love that philosophical like addition, because like I do think that people who are doing that need that as well.
Well, it's look, when what I was reminded of with the whole looks masking thing a little bit is yes, being aesthetically pleasant is always going to be an advantage, right? And aesthetic pleasantness doesn't mean one thing or another. There are lots of things in cultures far away from where we are that we would view as well, objectively ugly, that are viewed as being very attractive in those cultures, those places. More so, it just means like you have to set the premium is on setting yourself apart in some kind of meaningful way. And where I guess I go more so is, rather than being hot or being cool, you just have to you have to get a little weird. You have to be different. And it's going to be interesting to see in 2026 how different people get and how much you can push the thresholds of that before it starts to work.
Right. Well, I was gonna say is that like something with this is really interesting because I feel like we've kind of hit this cycle in some ways before, and like it's gonna take on weird, not weird, but interesting turns. Is that like, two things. Like when we think about like the early 2020s, where like TikTok made like everything a micro aesthetic and whatever, and like everybody then at that point, it seemed like, oh, everybody is doing this niche weird whatever. Exactly what you said, Ben, but like that never really coalesced into like everybody sort of living five different aesthetics and identities at once. Like that didn't really happen, which is
Yeah.
fine. That's unrealistic. That's performed for the camera. The thing that I think is going to be more interesting, like this has been sort of building for a long time, is like, at least in the fashion looks world, is that like it feels obvious that like people are going to get even deeper and deeper into the like, I got this at the Rose Bowl, and like I spent the time digging through the thing, and like I found this online or whatever. And it's gonna be less of the finding online, but in person, which is fine. That's always existed and will continue to exist. Where it's gonna get interesting, and we're like 5 seconds away from this, is like Mark Zuckerberg then doing it, and Jeff Bezos doing it. And then once that happens, where it's like, okay, the not leisure class, like people who like care about it and who are doing that work, then have someone who outsources that work to get the same result, then like that's going to collapse a lot of that too. And like that's really a final frontier, is like, I went to JetRag on La Brea and I spent 2 hours to find the gems. You did not, Jeff Bezos. And like that is, and maybe that's what's going to come down to, is like, I don't believe you. Show me that you did that,
Sure.
Jeff Bezos. Show me between these two ones which is better. And like it'll just be like literally a taste test.
So, well,
Yeah,
first of all, shout out to Rose Bowl. I do pride myself on
Shout
digging through
out.
the greats. Shout out to them. But yeah, it's
I've never. So this is just so everybody is clear, myself included. This is the Rose Bowl flea market. This is the big
Yes.
Sunday flea market out in Pasadena at the Rose
yes,
Bowl.
yes.
Okay, got it.
Once
Which
a month.
I have been aware of for many years, but have never been to. So
Never
one of
been.
these days, it's the
It's
same. It's the same as with Brimfield. I've never been to Brimfield either, which is another thing I need to do.
one of a kind. Truly, there's nothing else like it in the world. I've been to a lot of flea markets in the world. It is truly. There's a reason why people are there from Japan and from Europe, and like fashion designers are there. There is a reason. Anyway, Antonio, you were going to say something.
No, no, no. I was just gonna say I still laugh at it because it wasn't long ago before the like thrift and vintage boom that was looked down upon. Where the idea of wearing something that someone else wore was I could never do that. Now in if you go on a Depop or a Grilled, you can basically get an idea of what's trending based off what's on the front page of their platforms at this point. But I love thrifting, big thrifter. Obviously lived in LA, thrifted a ton there. The New York scene is unfortunately not the same. But yeah,
Well, that's a good take. That's a bold take. I have no idea, but
Why? So is that a function of space? Like you can't hold on to things long enough for them to become
Mm,
resonant again?
I want to say it's that it feels, and the pitchforks are probably going to come. It feels that in New York a lot because of to when you go into the New York thrift scene right now, a lot of the sellers are on the street,
Right.
which is cool. Like I love that. But if you have a physical location, that rent isn't cheap. So
Sure.
it feels a lot of the curation in New York tends to be very much what's trending, um, what's kind of like status and trendy. But in
Yeah.
LA, you'll have the guy who brings a shot A2 bomber that his great grandfather wore, and it's not overpriced. He's just like, hey, I think this is cool, and I'm selling it, and it has nothing to do with the trend or the status around it.
Right.
So New York's curation feels a little bit more status driven, at least on the public vintage and thrifting
Yeah.
scene. And LA's feels genuinely circulation of, I think this is cool and I want someone else to have it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny I record this show sitting in my living room in front of a big window, and so I'm looking out the porch. And literally, we were talking about this, somebody just came by and looked at some pillows that Marcella left out on the street earlier. I think part of it also is just that some of the New York stuff is just it's instantaneity and coincidence rather than like grand design. Get out there and thrift the streets of your city, people. Is what is really this.
Yeah.
This is the
Exactly.
real effort. Okay, well, so beyond that, Kyle, one of the things or a couple of things you pointed to were predictions for 2026. I have never been a wonderful predictor. I envy people who are. I more am the prediction version of the definition of pornography. I know it when I see it, kind of thing. But what you pointed out both the semaphore list of predictions and then the FT's list of predictions for 2026. What grabbed you there in particular?
I mean, I am with you. Like, I don't pride myself on predictions. I don't like making them. I think anybody who wants predictions is the same person who wants like data, and they want to have some like magic thing that tells them the thing that they need to bet on. It's like,
Sure.
no, like you need to just like make a decision. Like, don't anyway. But that's a whole other thing. But I enjoy that. I enjoy looking at these prediction stories in the same way that I enjoy like getting my tarot cards read, and that I enjoy like astrology. So to me, it's very similar. But I thought like the FT story and the FT's predictions, Semaphore's predictions, and even like the Business Week brands to watch, I think they did a really good job. Because like, yes, they're informed by a lot of very smart things, but I think they do sort of like dwell in the space of like, we're just thinking about this. Like, these are in our mind and these are predictions. I think, well, Financial Times, like a big one, like this is an ongoing theme, especially given what's happening, not necessarily just in Venezuela, but with Greenland, is like
Sure.
European power, like really about to fall to their knees, it feels like. And like, that is a bit of it's a thing. So that's been on my mind. As someone who lives in Europe, that's like something. But the other thing that I think is really interesting, and Semaphore brought this up, and I don't know if I agree with their take, is that like, this is obviously it's a midterm year, so it's elections, et cetera, but this is going to be the first election where like AI will be on the ballot, which is fascinating to think about. And like, I think what they said is like, that's not going to be like a make or break election issue. I disagree. I think it's going to be like a key issue. I think it's going to divide down party line. I think it's going to go down that sort of line of like, who is bought and paid for and who is of the people. I think it's going to, stream Eddington. Like, it really is going to be that in a really fascinating way. And like, I feel like to that, like, I think a lot of the sort of AI, whatever the phrase is, like the rooster's going to come home to roost or whatever. Like, it seems like this is the year where a lot of these things, was that the right way to say it? Doesn't matter.
No,
I'm not
the
familiar
quote
with
is
that.
the quote is that the chickens are going to come home to roost, and this
Yeah,
is
sure. The roosters come home and they
historically
become
controversial
chickens.
quote
Exactly.
for a variety
Well,
of different
sure.
reasons. So,
Right.
It's interesting you say that because I feel I always say like everyone needs an enemy, right? There's some with our lizard brains that like you need an enemy,
Absolutely.
something to go against, and AI is that issue to me where doesn't matter left or right, that's kind of the first unified enemy that can be attacked. I feel like that. So to the point of, is it going to be necessary yet, and the stance on it, but the larger issue there seems less party driven, more just retaliation to tech in general.
yeah, well, it's going to be intriguing to figure out how these things can be segmented, right? Like New York's Governor Kathy Hochul this morning or yesterday proposed AI being banned from political campaigns, or at the very least, AI generated human characters being banned from political campaigns. So in other words, you can't do the AI generated, Andrew Cuomo ad. You can only do like you could theoretically AI generate the background in which the real life Andrew Cuomo exists, but you could not generate Andrew Cuomo or, alternately your political enemies. Um, but it feels like the genie's out of the bottle in that note. It doesn't. I mean, I know there's a technological way to do it, but it doesn't feel like, practically speaking, it can be regulated all that well. And so it will be interesting to see where it finds its median.
I mean, that I don't. That's nothing that you can't enforce that. That's a part. It's a part of the playbook now. It's like just like having clippers, you're gonna have a team and a strategy designated to flooding the zone with AI generated content that pushes a narrative, and then you're gonna have some clippers clipping that, and it's just gonna be a part. Now, is it gonna be something that you can just do? Uh, let's say in the white hat approach of like you can just go ahead and this be a core part of a campaign? Probably not. It's going to be the gray market kind of like back channeling. But like you said, the genie is out of the bottle. Like I don't see how that can be enforced unless there's some damning evidence.
Well, on top of that, like it's not just that. It's like it's not just the enforcement. Like with the Cuomo thing, like you could tell, and like a lot of people could tell. But I think like in between, today Kathy Hope was saying that, and between like November, most people aren't going to be able to tell. So like even though
Mm-hmm.
they might enforce that, like even discerning eyes are going to have more and more difficulty doing that, which is a larger issue and a larger sort of like philosophical whatever. But like they're all, yeah, it's like you're right. The genie is out of the bottle, but I do think it will become that sort of like like brand showing their behind the scenes work. It'll be like candidates being like, I use no AI, I am for the people, I don't take any corporate money. Like it's going to be more like that sort of like your checkbox of like these are values, and I do think that's going to mean something to a lot of people.
Do you think we pay a premium going forward for brands that don't use AI? You know
In
what I
what
mean? Like,
capacity?
well, in other words, we're familiar, I'm sure, with the fact that Hermes last week relaunched their website with all hand drawn animal characters. It was sort of it's a cute idea, and it got a lot of attention. It's not a sustainable thing at all because it's a terrible showcase for the products themselves. But it was sort of like we are going to assert our value as a luxury brand by virtue of doing something fundamentally illogical almost. And I wonder to what extent we start to see that being a badge of honor and therefore a means to charge a premium.
I haven't thought about it in that context, but it does remind me of the like early B Corp DDC playbook, right? Where there was an additional fee because there was a portion of proceeds that went to a specific cause. The actual breakdown of that, sometimes wasn't as large as you thought it was or impactful, but I could see that, that's like made with 100% human creative talent, whatever. I do see that being something that can command a premium, people wanting to pay for.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like a P Corp status where you say
Yep.
that it's made with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's already sort of getting there. I think the difference
Shout out to
though,
our friends from Soylent.
right? Oh my God.
Antonio
Jeez.
said he was the prepared meal guy here, so that's I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
no Soylent.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no, but I get what you're
just
putting down.
JK. Only JK. Oh
Well, I think
man.
like that's exactly right. Like that's 100% going to happen, and like I think it already is happening. And like yes, the Hermes of it all, like even if it wasn't a practical thing, like it was a really good, showy, buzzy, whatever. But like they're walking into a trap too, and a lot of these brands are walking into a trap. It's going to be like it's going to be a new type of greenwashing. I think people are talking about this, like people washing. Is that like, sure, you can say Hermes that you are doing this, but also like are you paying a living wage to your factory workers and wherever? Like that's where it's then gonna like start to again, like this is all getting it's kicking up in a good way, I think. A lot of these larger philosophical questions. It's gonna expose like, yeah, you can be Chanel and you're like, oh well, people made this by hand and we only use people in our ads, but like, okay, but like
What about
you're
the sweatshop?
still profiting off of XYZ colonial trade practices that are whatever, like these things are like this is a big conversation in the fashion.
do we think or not? Sorry, I hate when people post questions like that. Do we think? No, you think something, I think
Give it
something.
to us.
Collectively, maybe we might think. No, what I was going to ask was, so I grew up in a straight edge vegan hardcore scene. This is in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s in Syracuse. And as my friends and I, like, we all became skateboarders first, and then we got into punk rock, and then we got into hardcore, and then we got into vegetarianism because of Youth of Today and Shelter, these bands. And then many of them became vegan, and then many of them became this kind of hardline vegan, which is like, I can't involve myself with any animal products at all. And they, you followed this down to this like rhetorically reductive point where you could literally not function unless you were growing everything yourself, right? It was unlivable. And many of those people snapped back like rubber bands in entirely other direction. I have one friend famously who went from being a straight edge vegan to being a chicken wing eating, leather coat having drug dealer over the course of a weekend. This is not, I mean,
Wow.
it was
That's I was
like,
expecting a longer time
no,
horizon.
like from
What happened?
Friday
Right.
from Friday to Sunday type thing. It
All
was
right.
wild. The point more so is that you just can't, that you have to find an equilibrium. And what I'm wondering, Kyle, as I listen to you say all of that, is that I think that all of that stuff is true. We do have to get to the source of things, but by the same token, when you really get into the source of things, you're going to find something that's not just uncomfortable, but really unsustainable. And so what I wonder is whether
Absolutely.
in 2026, we find our equilibrium a little bit in terms of the use of these digital tools versus the friction maxing of and proof of life.
I feel like you're starting to see that already with and I don't know why this conversation keeps coming up, but drinking versus not drinking, and
Because drinking's fun, but drinking too much is bad.
yeah,
And
and
that's
it's
why,
and
basically.
exactly, but it's again, we keep, I would say because of the algo and it loves extremes, we keep prioritizing the extreme and we don't find the balance because the balance isn't sexy, the balance isn't polarizing. It's I do this some days and it's
Right.
another day. Uh,
Regression to the mean
Right. But
doesn't
like
have
that,
much
like also
no
like,
sex appeal.
right. But maybe that is like, this is so dumb. And again, it's boring, which is why it's not sexing the algorithm and why it's not profitable, is that sort of like eating a balanced diet or like practicing a balanced life of like, I don't shop that much. I don't use the tech as much. Like, I'm doing these things in very healthy ways. Like, that also means like you're not shopping. You're not like, you're living a very comfortable life. You are sort of like doing your own plans, but also going to the store. You know what I mean? Like, so like that sort of like
Yeah,
being regulated
you're
is
not
not
participating.
good for capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. But like that's unfortunate reality is like, yeah, to all of that is like being real regular is actually like great. We should all be regular.
It's the absurdity of the modern condition.
Yeah.
Boy, I think we've all stumped each other here. All right, let's move on to something else. Um, Antonio, what do you see in 2026 that we haven't touched on already?
Now I'm stumped again.
All
Because I
right,
feel
let me.
my biggest thing was it growing anti-tech sentiment, especially someone that worked and loved it, loves tech. But definitely seeing how like seeing how you don't I don't know, you haven't seen the lately you haven't seen in the public kind of like those great sides of like tech, of like progress, and it seems the thing that gets pushed in front of us is more of the speculation, or defense, or some of those elements that you know aren't necessarily what you're trying to focus on.
Right.
What are the like I mean the again, the idea of like if you look at it from a millennial POV of you had Uber, you had micro commuting, you had startups like Acorns and just these ideas that were meant to benefit you. And now
Right.
it doesn't really seem that, or at least the narrative isn't being pushed that way, from taking your job to replacement of labor to speculation. So um, I see that, but we've already touched on that. And then the other is just the replacement of socialization with it's again, I did a video on it, but the decline of partying, something that's been said a lot. But what I've noticed, especially from like a New Year's POV, was that there weren't a ton of people outside. A lot of those elements from 2025 I still see carrying over, but the biggest one in 2026 I see is just a growing resentment towards tech.
Go ahead, Kyle. You just sound like you had
Yeah.
some
Well, I was gonna say the
violent
party
agreement.
thing. I'm kind of shocked by that, but like I think you're right. But like that's like that. Yeah, the
I'm
tech thing.
taking
I
the other
think
side of
like
that bet.
really okay. I
It's
mean, I
not,
can
Yeah,
agree. I
I'll
maybe I go
explain.
right
I'll
in the
explain in
middle.
a second, but I'm
Okay.
taking the other side of that bet.
But the tech one, I would agree. Like, I think to me, like, I think this is the year, and maybe this is a bit extreme or optimistic in a way. It's like, but I feel like this is the year where like the sort of like how to blow up a pipeline mentality starts to actually emerge. Where like, I would not be surprised if this was the year where like destruction of property happens to tech places, like things like that. Like I feel like it's not quote unquote going to harm a person, but like it will be really symbolic when somebody in a small community burns down a crypto farm and a data center and things like that. And I think that's sort of like going to these sites that are literally destroying communities and destroying them is something
Yeah,
it feels like we're getting to that. I'm like,
yeah. I
I,
look. I under, I appreciate the underlying sentiment there, but I think it's the challenge with it is that these like a data center doesn't look threatening. It's just it's a warehouse. And then if you want to get into places that are really breaking down the fabric of small communities, you're going to go to the Dollar General before you go to the megatech data center, right? Like
you're
that's
saying
the
it's
place.
destruct, like you would
That's well,
like tear
look.
down the Dollar General versus the
I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like if you're a small farmer who can't, you know, pay back your loans because you need a special computerized tractor and everything is selling at Dollar General for commodity prices, you're much more likely to break down the Dollar General because it's there in front of you, as opposed to the server farm that's behind a fence and in a building. What I but I think the sentiment is there, Kyle, and it's going to be interesting to see how it actually manifests. I don't anticipate a bunch of bomb throwing luddites like blowing up data centers. I really don't. Although you could see that in espionage or state action. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think Dollar General though. Careful, be careful.
Dollar General hater.
I
Wow.
I feel the
I'm not. I don't
yeah,
hate Dollar General.
yeah.
I just think like it's a much more obvious symbol of the kind of deleterious effect of big business in small communities than almost anything else.
I don't know. Like I feel like it's like I think the Dollar General. Look, I mean you're right, but like I think the Dollar General is doing more for a local community than like the parasite that is the bigger thing. I think like I think those relationships are less abstract now. Like I think a lot more localized people who may be divorced from all that stuff understand that they're being preyed upon. And I think like it's not just a data center; it's many other things. I
Yeah,
think like the data
I
center is a
wish
good symbol, and maybe
I
it's
wish I
not them,
agree. I
but I
wish I
think
agreed
when
with you, but I just think
somebody,
it's like the fact that Trump's like voter base is the people who are being most actively harmed by him directly makes me feel like the ability to discern that is not necessarily as available. I don't
that's
know,
fair.
Antonio. What do you think? Otherwise, Kyle and I are just gonna sit here and argue the whole time.
No, I mean, the Dollar General is almost the most affordable kind of pillar of the community, place for that not even just lower income, but yeah, lower income. But I see the Dollar General being more of a pillar, and the data center being easier is being the go-to of this took my job or this played a role in it, this impacted my water. People grocery shop at Dollar Generals and like Family Tree. So
Yeah,
I don't see that being the enemy. It would, to me, it's like I don't know if it's a data center, but that conversation, and it's I think it's a data center more than it would be the.
yeah. Well, look, I
Yeah.
think, and this is kind of my point. I think in real terms, that is 100% too. In
Yeah,
practical terms, it's the threat and its menace is actually more abstruse, and so it's not as easy to connect to like the minute to minute changes that people are experiencing. Um, along with everything from commodity prices to just availability of goods. Look, either way, I'm not mad. I just want to be very clear. I'm not mad at DG. I just think that it's
Yeah.
It occupies a very
Sponsors Dollar
precarious.
General.
It occupies a very precarious place in
Totally.
our American society in particular. Okay, well here's let me change directions and slowly. So one of the reasons I think there's a new kind of partying, not a new kind. I think there's a return to a kind of partying in 2026 and probably for the next 2 to 3 years that will look very familiar to people of my generation. And that is the brand funded party for the sake of partying,
Yes.
hands in hands strategy of product distribution, because you have this triangulation, and I probably talk about this on the pod, but it's like triangulation of throttling of individual social reach from influencers, which some people tell me isn't true, but my anecdotal evidence says otherwise. The increase in commodity cost of living crisis, affordability crisis, whatever you want to call that, and then also this Gen Z, this incipient Gen Z desire to learn to socialize in a way that they haven't ever really been exposed to, brings together this thing where people want to gather in big groups, they want to interact with one another, they don't have any money to do it, and so therefore brands have to get involved as the underwriters. But in order to do that, there has to be an economic viability for it. That means you spend less per head to get people in, and you focus more on distributing products through those moments. So that's one of my predictions. I think also physical collateral as promo distributed for free through IRL destinations is also going to have a big couple of years.
It's just
zines, stickers, buttons, so on and so forth.
It's just a return to the basics, but I do think party will change and as far as on the reach darling, I actually just think attention is fragmenting. So less of it being
right, sure.
Just fragmented, but the only area in that is that the other part of is the phones. I feel like people do want to party. They just hate the constant surveillance around it, the ability to not let loose. So I do feel branded experiences will obviously kind of like the 2010s era activation of we're throwing a party and you come in. But what's interesting to me is how much of that is actually going to be catered to the experiences versus catered to make some content out of it for a group that doesn't actually want to make content.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's
all
a good
right.
point.
Well, speaking of making content, we have reached the end of this particular content generation session. But Antonio, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Where can people find you so they can follow along in the future?
Yeah, at Antonio Gary Jr. across the internet, IG, TikTok, and YouTube. I have an X, I just haven't been posting, but Instagram, TikTok, YouTube is my bread and butter.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you know where to find Kyle at 1234 Kyle 5678 on Substack for the Trend Report and on Instagram, etc. Elsewhere, I'm at Deets Nuts on most platforms, and then sick.substack.com. And this is Hip Replacement. We're here every Monday, coming out every Tuesday. So please come back and see us next week, including, if you're in the New York area, live recordings for the next 2 shows. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch and let us know. We will be circulating details shortly. All right. Kyle, Antonio, great to talk to you guys.
Great talking.
Great chat. Thanks, y'all.
We'll be tapping in next week live.
Dude, I love that. I love that. We'll see you in a room.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Easy.